voice low and deliberate. We live in a world built on freedom, or at least, that's what we've been told. Freedom to earn. Freedom to spend. Freedom to build the life we want. But what if that freedom was quietly replaced? Not by force, not by war, but by finance. What if the true chains of modern life aren't made of iron but of interest rates, credit limits, and national debt? Because here's the truth few dare to say out loud. Every country on earth is drowning in debt, and yet somehow the world keeps turning. So the question is, who actually owns the world when everyone owes someone? This is the story of how the global debt machine turned freedom into finance, and how every paycheck, every loan, every government bailout is just another cog in a system designed to keep the illusion alive. Part 1. The origins. When money stopped being real calm. Historical tone. To understand the machine, we have to rewind. Not decades, but centuries. Once, money meant something real. A coin of gold, a bar of silver. Value was weight, tangible, limited, and honest. But that kind of money was slow. It couldn't grow fast enough for kings who wanted wars, or empires that wanted expansion. So, they invented paper promises. Notes that represented gold, but weren't gold themselves. That was the first trick of the financial magician, to make symbols replace substance. By the early 20th century, this illusion had become normal. Banks didn't hold everyone's money. They held a fraction of it. And yet, through fractional reserve banking, they could lend out 10 times what they actually owned. That's how money began multiplying. Not from hard work, but from debt itself. And in 1913, one event locked this system into place forever: the creation of the Federal Reserve. It wasn't the first central bank, but it was the model that changed everything. From that day on, money would no longer be purely national. It would be controlled, engineered, and expanded by unseen hands. Part 2. The rise. Turning debt into wealth. Debt used to be something you avoided, but after World War II, it became the foundation of prosperity. Governments borrowed to rebuild. Corporations borrowed to expand. Consumers borrowed to live the American dream. And behind the scenes, bankers discovered something extraordinary. Debt creates money. Every loan issued wasn't just borrowed cash. It was new money, digitally born out of thin air, existing only because someone promised to pay it back with interest. The more people borrowed, the richer the system became. By the 1970s, that machine hit its next evolution. When President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, the last link between money and reality was severed. From that moment, dollars were no longer backed by gold. They were backed by nothing but trust. And trust, as it turns out, could be printed. This new world, called the fiat system, gave central banks godlike power. They could conjure wealth, set interest rates, and control the flow of global prosperity, not by production, but by policy. Money stopped being something you earned. It became something you owed. Part 3. The breaking point. When debt fed on itself for a while, it worked beautifully. The 1980s and 1990s brought explosive growth. Markets soared. Credit cards became symbols of success, and governments discovered they could borrow endlessly. But there was a cost hidden beneath the prosperity. The more money they created, the more debt they needed to keep the illusion alive. When debt stopped growing, everything stopped. In 2008, that illusion cracked. The global financial crisis wasn't just about housing, it was about leverage. Banks were lending money they didn't have to people who couldn't pay, using assets that weren't worth what they claimed. And when it all collapsed, trillions of dollars vanished. Except they didn't vanish, because the governments stepped in. They printed more. They bailed out the very machine that caused the collapse. Debt was the disease, and somehow, it became the cure. Part 4. The fallout. When nations become borrowers today, the United States owes over $35 trillion. Globally, the world's total debt has crossed $310 trillion. That's nearly 3 times more than the total global GDP. We've entered a paradox. The only way to keep economies alive is to create more debt. But the more debt we create, the weaker those economies become. Governments sell bonds to stay afloat. Corporations issue debt to buy back their own stocks. Consumers drown in credit cards and student loans just to survive. It's a machine that feeds on growth. And when growth slows, the system threatens to eat itself. The worst part, it's not accidental. Because this cycle of debt benefits one class, above all others, the owners of capital. Banks collect interest. Investors profit from inflation, and ordinary people are left running faster just to stay in place. Freedom, the ability to own your life, your labor, your future, has been financialized. You don't work for money anymore. You work to service someone else's loan. Part 5. Failed fixes and the illusion of control. Every time the machine stumbles, central banks do the same thing. Print, promise, and postpone. They lower interest rates, buy government bonds, and flood markets with liquidity. They call it stabilization, but it's really addiction management. Each fix requires a bigger dose. In 2008, they printed trillions. In 2020, they printed tens of trillions more. And the next crisis, whatever shape it takes, will demand even more stimulus. But the word stimulus hides the truth. It's debt, borrowed from the future, disguised as prosperity today. And what happens when the future runs out? Part 6. Modern parallels. The new debt frontier today. S financial frontier. SNT gold or oil. S data and digital currency. Central banks around the world are racing to create CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. They promise safety, speed, and transparency. But critics warn it's the final step in turning money into control. Imagine a future where your spending can be tracked, taxed, or even blocked instantly, where your financial freedom depends not on your wallet, but on a database. That's not a conspiracy. It's already being tested in countries like China, Sweden, and even the EU. The same institutions that created debt out of thin air now want to create money with memory, programmable, traceable, and controllable. The machine has evolved again, and this time, it doesn't just want your money. It wants your behavior. Part 7. What ITLMEANS, the global debt machine didn't just change economies, it changed values. It turned citizens into consumers, governments into borrowers, and money into an instrument of obedience. But systems built on illusion don't last forever. History shows that every empire that drowned in debt eventually collapsed, from Rome to Britain to modern superpowers. The signs are repeating. Rising inflation, collapsing trust, and a global generation questioning what money even means. Maybe that's why alternative systems, crypto, gold, decentralized finance, keep reappearing, each one a rebellion against a structure that feels more like a cage than a choice. Final takeaways. Takeaway 1. Debt is not a flaw. It's the engine of the system. The machine only runs when people owe something. Takeaway 2. Freedom, once measured in rights and choices, has been quietly redefined as financial participation. Spend, borrow, consume. Takeaway 3. Every crisis isn't the end of the system. It's the mechanism that keeps it alive. Collapse is built into the design. Closing warning plus call to action voice.com, but chilling. The next time you swipe your card, take a loan, or watch another $1 trillion bailout, remember, this isn't just economics, it's architecture. A structure of control built from numbers, trust, and silence. And as long as we keep believing that freedom is measured by what we can buy, the machine will keep turning. But awareness is the first crack in its armor. If this story opened your eyes, share it, question it, and look deeper. Because the moment you understand how the system works, you're no longer just part of it. You're outside it, watching it. And that's where true freedom begins. End title card: How the Global Debt Machine Turned Freedom into Finance. A story not about money, but about control.